Welcome to today's episode of Z-Community's Tech Talks. This is episode number 2. Our special guest today is Grant. How are you, Grant?
Very good to be here, Simon. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Grant, today we're going to be talking about mobile photography, the surrounding hardware, software, and usage. If you don't mind just going ahead and giving our audience a little overview of yourself.
Yeah, no problem. Like you said, my name is Grant. I'm a mobile technology enthusiast, I guess you could say. I've been into technology pretty much all my life. I started with building desktop PCs back in the day when that was cool, especially the home theater PCs, and then the technology moved to mobile. So I got deep into mobile technology and specifically smartphones right now. I tend to buy a lot of the latest and greatest. I like to use some of what you would call the flagships out there, some of the latest and greatest technology. So I just decided to start my YouTube channel just to share my experiences with everyone else who may not be able to get their hands on with the device and maybe help them make a purchase decision. So that's kind of how I got into YouTube.
Excellent. So at the end of this video, our audience should have a greater understanding of how some of this technology works, and maybe they could learn a little bit about potentially purchasing some of these devices that you talk about in the stream today. So my first question to you is actually this. Do you need to purchase a flagship to get a good camera?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. Short answer, I guess, in my experience, yes. Are they better? Then, in my experience, yes. I mean, for me, autofocus, shutter speed tends to be faster, and quality in low light tends to be noticeably better for me. Stabilization also tends to be a lot better, as most of the flagships, their optical image stabilization, which is hardware-based stabilization for your video, and or software-based stabilization, electronic stabilization. So all those things are noticeably better for me in my experience in using the quote-unquote flagships. But the long answer to that really is, the budget to mid-range phones, especially the ones that are around $150 to maybe $500 or less, have really closed the gap here in 2017 and has made that decision a lot harder for people, I think. And budget phones like the Axon 7 Mini, that I think you could have around for $200 or less now, really takes great photos in good lighting, as most of these phones do nowadays. Phones like the Moto G5 Plus, which is around the same price range, maybe a little bit more, can even take above average photos and really more than usable photos in even low light situations. Phones closer to what people consider the mid-range pricing, like the Axon 7, can really take some pretty good photos itself. And most recently, I've reviewed the OnePlus 5 with its dual cameras, and it's around the $500 price point, and that phone has really exceeded my expectations. I really didn't think much about it until I got it in hand. Its dual cameras perform really well, even rivaling some of the so-called flagships like the iPhone 7 Plus or the Galaxy S8. And I've done a couple of camera comparison videos on my channel if people want to actually see the results for themselves and judge for themselves, but that's out there. And I think finally, if you're really looking at the performance gap, right? So there's a performance gap worth the extra $200, $300, $400 between these lower end phones and the so-called flagships. And I think that's really going to be up to each individual person to kind of decide on that based off of their usage, their needs, and expectations of a smartphone camera. I think some people where the smartphone is their only camera, their photos maybe of their kids or even print them out in high resolution later, they're really going to benefit from, I think, a flagship camera, and it probably is worth the extra money for them. For other people who only want to kind of casually share their photos, maybe post them to social media, will probably feel that these budget to mid-range phones are going to be more than enough and provide them with a very good camera experience. So I think in that regard, people need to make that decision. I think that's where it can be good and beneficial. For me, I'll always lean towards the flagships just because that's just me. I like to use the latest and greatest.
Excellent. Be sure to check out Grant's channels for some of those camera comparisons. He does a really in-depth, great job on comparing those devices. My next question here for you is, there's different ways of shooting. There's auto mode, there's manual mode, there's using secondary cameras on phones. What do you make of these modes, and how do you actually use those in your daily shooting?
Yeah, that's always a tough call. Manual mode can be really confusing for a lot of people, even myself sometimes. But for me personally, I shoot all my camera reviews and my camera comparisons in full auto mode on these phones, just because I think that's what the majority of using their smartphone cameras, including myself, really. Most of the time, I and most people don't have the luxury of playing with manual settings, as a lot of the moments that we want to capture occur spontaneously. So However, you know, if you have the time to compose your shot, you know, and you're finding that the picture is maybe too dark or blurry in shooting in low light situations, you can always go into the manual or pro mode of your camera if you've got that on your smartphone, and just increase the ISO a little bit to your liking. At some point though, if you get that ISO a little bit too high, you're gonna start to see some of that digital noise creep in. So keep that in mind as you're kind of playing with those settings there. Fast moving objects, you wanna get a still photo and as sharp as possible, like maybe your fast running kids or something like that. Then you can try going into manual mode and increasing your shutter speed. If you've got a tripod, even better, and you want to shoot some, you know, fancier photos, like some streaking effects, like streaking car lights. You've seen a lot of those types of photos. Then you can try slowing down that shutter speed a bit, and especially with a tripod where you won't have to worry about any kind of shake. Slowing down that shutter speed should give you, and cranking down the ISO or up a little bit, depending to your liking, should give you some potential streaking tail light cars and some cool effects. But you know, at some point, play with these manual settings, you're still going to be limited to the capabilities of the camera phone. While it's still amazing at the quality you can get, there still could be some limitations based off of our previous conversation about budget versus flagship. But those are just some things you can do in the manual modes to kind of improve the quality of your photos. But like I said, I personally tend to use full auto most of the time.
Definitely.
And I think dual cameras. I think the dual camera is the interesting craze now, especially in 2017. You know, you've got a lot of different approaches to implementing that dual camera. A lot of people are using things like monochrome as a secondary lens, like a lot of the Huawei phones you see, which is really cool. I mean, if you're into photography, like true black and white photo, it's a really good way to reduce a lot of that kind of chroma noise that you see if it's not a true black and white lens. Also enables you to do cool things that everyone likes nowadays, which is your bokeh effect, that in-focused subject with that blurred out background. Other ways people are implementing that secondary camera are through telephoto lenses, like your iPhone 7 Plus or your OnePlus 5 is taking this approach. And that really gives you that 2x optical zoom, which is really good, a lot sharper picture. Also gives you that portrait mode with that bokeh effect, which everyone really loves. You've got LG's approach to it, which is the wide angle secondary camera. So, you know, the V20, the G6, and even the newly announced V30 will have that secondary camera with a wide angle lens. And they have a really wide angle, 130-degree field of view. So it can fit in a lot of stuff. So if you're standing close to a huge object, you can get it fully in the frame. Or if you want to take a big group selfie or something like that, it comes in handy for that. But what's even more interesting, I think, is the Note 8 that was just announced. You know, it's got both wide and telephoto lenses stabilized, which should really help for not just more stable photos, but for even better photos in low light with both lenses. The implementation there. But really what's really cool this year is, you know, dual cameras have come to the budget phones, right? So ZTE Blade X Max that was just released, it's got dual cameras, and it can do some of these cool bokeh effects, portrait mode effects that everyone likes, and also monocolor, which is really interesting, where you've got everything in black and white. You can just choose to focus in on a red color, a blue color, a green color, and make that color stand out and pop. So even on these budget phones nowadays, you've got this dual camera implementation to give you a lot of flexibility and take some really interesting photos and some fun photos.
Awesome. Yeah, the dual camera setup on the Blade Z Max, actually it's pretty impressive with those monochrome colors.
Yeah, the monochrome setting is really fun. I think a lot of people are gonna like that one.
Excellent. So my next question is, you know, I search on Amazon, I pull up a page for mobile accessories, and there's thousands and thousands out there.
Sure.
Are there any recommendations that you have for ones that work? Tripods,
Sure.
camera lenses?
Maybe new to smartphone photography and you kind of just want to improve your quality of your pictures. I think the first thing that anyone would really tell you to do is get a tripod. And it doesn't have to be an expensive one. I think the misconception is people think, oh, you know, if I have to buy things like a tripod, they're hundreds of dollars. And the professional ones are, but you know, I use a $40 tripod off of Amazon myself. So nothing fancy. It gets the stabilization that you need when you're not doing any kind of moving photography or video. But if you really want those kind of really cool, nice, smooth, sweeping panning shots that you see in some of the YouTube videos, you're going to need a fluid head on that tripod, and that can be expensive, but there are some relatively affordable ones out there. There's one on Amazon that we can maybe link to in the description here that's $80, and while that's not necessarily cheap for a lot of folks, I think for a fluid head on a tripod, it is relatively affordable. Next thing is, if you want to do more mobile photography, move around and shoot photos or video, you might want to invest in a handheld gimbal. So if you want to do handheld and move around, you can use something like this. It's basically, these gimbals basically just stabilize the video. So you basically just go ahead and place your smartphone into this holder here, and it's motorized and it will balance out your smartphone. You've got some cool controls on this one. This one is from DJI. DJI is very famous for their drones. So they have like their Phantom series, their Mavic Pro series, but they also have a lot of these handheld stabilizers. And this is one that's meant for the smartphones. It's called their Osmo Mobile. And it's got some cool controls to automatically record and stop recording. You have a joystick up and down, so you can even do panning shots with this. So if you want that really nice, smooth, stabilized panning shots, you can even do it with something like this. And now this is a little bit pricey. It's retails for $300. There's ones out there on Amazon from like companies like Zhiyun. It's a Chinese company that they make a ton of stabilizing, handheld stabilizers for smartphones. I believe their Smooth Q right now is exactly like this. It's going to look exactly like this, have the same hardware functionality, and that's retailing for about $120, so a fraction of the price. The only caveat there is that I think the software, maybe is as good as a local company like DJI, but you can really save yourself a good amount of dollars there by going with something a little bit more affordable. And maybe the last thing, clip-on lenses. So I kind of just reviewed this clip-on lens from Amir on my channel. It's their 2-in-1 lens. It's a wide-angle lens on the outside, and you can just, and you get to a macro lens. So this is really good for even high-end smartphones, flagships like the Galaxy S8 Plus. You can even improve photography from that, because even that can only get so close to a subject before it can't focus. And so you clip on this macro lens onto something even like a Galaxy S8 Plus, and you can get even closer, sharper macro. Screw back on the wide-angle lens, and this provides you with that wide-angle shot. So if you don't have an LG phone or another phone with a wide-angle built-in lens, this can help you capture those really big objects that you can't fit into the frame, or more importantly, things like, if you want to take group selfies, because it's clip-on, you can easily just clip it on the front to the back of your camera, and just make sure that you align it to the lens. This is running for about $20, I think, on Amazon, so a relatively inexpensive way to have some fun with your smartphone photography.
Excellent. Those are some really awesome accessories out there. I'm going to have to get one of those gimbals to up my cinematography. And we'll actually also put those items down in the description, so if some of the viewers want to take a look at them, they'll have those links.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, another question that pops up on Z-Community a lot, I even have this question sometimes myself. What are some of the most popular and easy ways to store all those photos and videos from your smartphone?
Yeah, I think even though the smartphones are coming with more and more capacity, you are going to want to offload those and preserve some of those. I put them onto my local computer, and I have that hooked up to a backup solution. It's an external drive called Drobo. It's basically a hardware unit that can house up to, my unit can store 5 hard drives. And what it does is provides redundant storage, meaning that if I've got at least in my row, that if one of those hard drives decide to fail, I don't lose any of my photos or whatever I'm storing on there. So redundant storage is a really good thing. If you don't really want to, the other good thing about Drobo is that it's hot swappable drives. So if one dies, I can just pop one out, stick one in without having to turn it off, restart it, worry about losing data, nothing. So it's very easy to put the drives in, back everything up to it, and forget about it. And I think I've got about 4 terabytes on that. So for me, that's storage. You just pop it into the drive and off I go. But if you don't want to really invest that much money into it, because they're not really necessarily that inexpensive, you can just get maybe a relatively inexpensive hard drive. External hard drives right now on Amazon or anywhere else, relatively inexpensive. You just plug that in and just have your photos and videos periodically back up to that. Moreover, I think you probably also want to have another base of storage. So if your hard drive goes out, even if for some reason catastrophic failure happened to my Drobo backup, I always store things in the cloud. So it's off-site backup. And in case anything, computer, your backup, local backup solution, put it into the cloud. There's a lot of cloud services now that are offering a lot of storage for free. Google Photos for a lot of your Android users. You know, they got Google Photos for iOS too. They offer unlimited storage for their what they call high quality photos, so not full original versions of your photos, but it's unlimited storage at a fairly good resolution. If you want to store the exact resolution, the exact file, they allow you to do that too, but you can be limited to the amount of storage you have on your drive. A lot of you, like me, are fortunate enough to get a lot of free Google Drive stores through some of their previous offers on other smartphone sales, etc., where they're offering a lot of free storage. I think I've got over a terabyte right now for myself. That's one good option. Other services that offer free storage are things like Microsoft OneDrive or even Amazon Photos, especially if you're a Prime member. So there's a lot of online cloud storage services that give you a lot of free storage, and I think people should really take advantage of that. And you know, you don't have to pick one. I say if you have free access to storage across all of them, put them on all of them. And you know, you have as many backups as you possibly need for especially the photos that you really want to keep and cherish.
Excellent. That's some really great info, and free is definitely for me.
Yeah, me too.
Well, there you have it, folks. That concludes this episode of Z-Community's Tech Talks. A really special thank you goes out to Grant for joining us today. Grant, can you let our users know where they can check out all of your channels?
Yeah, sure. You know, first off, thanks to you and the Z community for having me on. It's a really fun and a really big honor to be on just the second episode here. But like I mentioned before, I've got a YouTube channel that I just started a few months ago. You can find me on YouTube if you search for Grant S. As well. I'm also on the 808 as well as at G08_IG. You can check out all my postings there. I post my everything else out there. I've got some recent samples of the Blade X Max cameras and all those fun modes. I posted that to Twitter and my Instagram, so feel free to check that out if you're interested.
Definitely. We'll put those links down in the description for all of our viewers to see. And I do have one more question, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here.
Sure.
Could you nominate 3 other people that you would believe would be a good fit for our Tech Talks?
Sure. Picking just 3 is hard. I know a lot of folks that might be a good fit for this, but I think maybe the 3 that come to mind, I think number 1 is George Hayes, aka the Mobile Geezer. Great YouTube channel, great insight into mobile technology, really passionate about it, including ZTE devices. I think the second person that comes to mind is maybe Tamika Frank. Tamika Franklin, she goes by T Frank online. She also has a great YouTube channel focusing on a lot of budget devices. And she does a really nice job with her videos, a lot fancier than mine. So go check her out as well. And I think she'd be a good fit for this. And then lastly, I think Anthony from My Project 13. He's really passionate, probably one of the most passionate people I've seen on YouTube about talking about mobile technology and the whole smartphone thing. You know, he'll post daily videos and he'll let it fly. And I think that'll be a really fun conversation.
Excellent. Perfect. We're actually going to go ahead and reach out to those guys. So hopefully they're watching and hopefully they get ready for us.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thanks, Grant. Take care.
Thanks for having me, and it was a lot of fun. Hope to do it again.